Hi, this is Dave, and before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners. And that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 in the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars. Hello there. This is Dave, and with me is Alora.
Hi.
And welcome to What Does Star Wars Mean to You? The show where we talk to all kinds of fans of Star Wars, from obsessive mythologists to mega collectors, from indie artists to inside industry people.
All
is that right?
Star Wars people. Inside the industry people. The people with the knowledge. Yeah.
Industry insiders, I think, is usually the phrase.
The keepers of the secrets.
Yes. And, we're just looking to take the hate out of the debate and focus on a certain point of view of Star Wars.
And ours.
And ours. This is the episode between episode, which gives us a chance to talk about the things we want to talk about. And usually we use last week's guest as kind of the launching point.
Yeah. Last
week we had Cavan Scott, which was an amazing guest. He's also the author of The Rising Storm, which is part of the High Republic series. He's one of the, I believe it's 5 authors who were kind of the think tank behind the High Republic. And so he's written a lot of stuff. He's written audio, plays, and
comics.
And, comic books. He's written so much. Anyway.
You probably read a Cavan Scott work and maybe you didn't even know it.
Exactly. I'm sure you did. I know I did.
Yeah.
Although I do a lot of things that I don't even know I'm doing. Anyway, that's for later.
It was a very exciting opportunity to get to pick his brain, and I think he surprised us.
Yes, because you would think we would cover the High Republic this week in our episode between episodes, but he was like, by the way, I love Ewoks, and I have a cell frame of from the Ewok cartoon.
The original animation.
Why don't we talk Ewoks then?
Yes, which made me very happy because I adore them. I literally have a t-shirt that says Park Ranger Endor.
Really? Oh, that sounds like a good t-shirt. I have to get me one of those.
Etsy.
But before we dive into that, let me give the handles. If you want to jump in and be part of the conversation, you can do so at Star Wars Mean to You. That's at Star Wars Mean, the number 2 in the letter U. So let us know what you think about Ewoks.
Yeah.
Because we're going to talk about the first animated episode of Ewoks, and then also Ewoks, what was it?
Well, the original title's Caravan of Courage.
Yes,
but now
the movie.
It's like an Ewok adventure or something now? What was the new title? Yeah, the Ewok Adventures. We wanted to take a look back at the Ewoks through the lens of Cavan Scott's fandom for them and just see if our thoughts and opinions have changed.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so here's a little background on both Caravan of Courage and the Ewoks cartoon. Now, in my experience, and I'm a original trilogy kid, so I kind of grew up with the Ewoks. They've always been a little maligned. The original thing that destroyed Star Wars before JarJar Binks.
Wow.
Okay, so Caravan of Courage was a made-for-TV movie that premiered on November 25th, 1985.
Yeah.
And Ewoks the cartoon premiered on September 7th, 1985. Both were on the ABC. And now that I think about it, we're 1 year away from the 40th anniversary of the Ewok.
Both predated my life by about 8 years.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
I was so deep into this, and she wasn't even born yet.
That was a low blow. Okay, well, let's get... So I'm coming at this fresh was really the intention behind that comment.
Yeah, I watched this on TV.
Yes, I watched this on streaming through the Roku. And so for those who have not seen it, who might have been a prequel kid like me and maybe missed it, Caravan of Courage, an Ewok adventure, it takes place before the events of Return of the Jedi. And it kind of introduces like a new cast of characters alongside the familiar Ewoks we do get to know in Return of the Jedi. Essentially, the story goes, is it Tawani family? I would think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Katarine, Jeremit, and their children, their elder son, Mace, and their younger daughter, it's Sindel, right?
Yeah,
Am I saying that right? Sindel, yeah.
Yeah.
Forgive me. Everyone who watches Star Wars know that there's always a question mark around whether you're pronouncing something correctly.
It's actually Sindel.
Oh, yeah. See, but I wouldn't put it past George Lucas. Anyway,
yeah, true.
or any of the creators. So they crash their starship on Endor, and we encounter very familiar faces, Ewoks like Wicket and Kinessa, Logray and Teak, but we also get to meet like a whole new cast of characters. We really get to kind of, I think we meet most of their little society at this point in time, actually.
Yes. It felt like there should have been a Brady Bunch open. Yeah.
Yes. So they crash their starship on Endor. They are separated as a family. There's a monster that steals the parents away from the kids. And Mace, again, the elder son, is kind of initially aggressive towards the Ewoks who do kind of find them. But he befriends Wicket, who is played by Warwick Davis, who is an actor that's near and dear to my heart because of his performance in Willow. Yeah. Anyone who's listened prior to this knows my love of Willow. But anyway, the Ewoks discover...
Your namesake.
My namesake. The Ewoks discover that there's a life monitoring device near the ship, and that there's also like a boar wolf carcass. And Logray, one of the Ewoks, reveals that the creature responsible for their kidnapping is this like monster that I think kind of like has been raining terror upon the planet named Gorax. After 47 minutes of exposition, most of which focused on Sindel falling ill and the Ewoks curing her with their homeopathic medicine, they decide that they're going to form a caravan with all the main players here, and they're going to kind of collect some more like almost like shamanistic Ewoks that kind of that they know of along the way, that are going to help them along in their journey. And they face many challenges. The caravan itself, y'all, is a lot shorter than the exposition leading up to it. So anyone who's tuning in, just be mindful of that. They face flash floods. They face a grumpy hermit. There's like a mischievous spirit that leads them astray at one point.
There's like weird lakes that they fall into.
Yes. Yeah. Mace ends up in the lake at one point. Not going to lie. I actually kind of missed how that initially happened and had to back up. Their journey. Yeah. So they go through this journey, but it's through their teamwork, Dave, and their resourcefulness that they overcome these obstacles. Their Ewokness. But it's not without tragic loss. Chukachok sacrifices himself to save Mace from a dangerous fall. So there's loss and sacrifice, and it was very sad, actually. No one wants to see an Ewok die.
Yeah. I actually, when he died, I was a little bit like, wow, they're really like pulling from the movie, because that's the saddest scene in Return of the Jedi when the Ewok dies.
Yeah.
And now they're doing it again?
Yeah.
Low blow, man.
But it shows you how much, but doesn't that say so much about like Ewoks and their culture and like the importance of like, protecting your friends and all of that. So anyway, long story short, or short story long, they reach Gorax's lair. They discover the imprisoned parents are still alive after many, many days. I'm surprised that they're still alive actually after so many days. It's not entirely exposed as to like what he was holding them hostage for.
No, he was just keeping them in a giant cage.
Yeah. But anyway, a fierce battle ensues. The Ewoks use their ingenuity and their fire magic to weaken Gorax, and the family's reunited. And they all share in a celebratory dinner back at camp. Ewok, I don't know if they actually ever tell you what their little town is called in the treetops.
No.
And then they take off on their repaired ship, forever grateful for their friendship and their courage. That's my recap of Caravan of Courage.
A great recap. Here's a question then. The mother, did the mother have the outfit that, I mean, this would have been great if the mother was wearing the outfit that Leia wears in Return of the Jedi. So it's like, here's the origin story of how Leia got how the Ewoks got Leia's outfit.
Oh my God, that would have been hilarious.
Jedi.
Yeah,
right?
Like someone pulled it out of like an old trunk and was like, this might work. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, that would have been a good callback. One of the things that was interesting is, I think we were texting about this while we were watching it, like Mace not only did the actor they hire really resemble a young Luke.
Yes, absolutely.
He also was dressed like a fighter pilot.
Yeah, he had the X-wing orange on and the like a white vest.
Yeah.
And all the the tool belt and everything.
I actually Googled him to see if he was some kind of like distant relative of Mark Hamill because they look so similar.
And they had the same kind of wine. They what? Why are we still here? We have to go save Mom and Dad.
Yes. There was a lot of, what was the one line he kept quoting where we were like, that's so Luke. Hey, wait a minute. That was the one.
Hey, wait a minute.
He kept saying, hey, wait a minute. Yeah.
Here's the thing with this, and I don't want to review it.
Yeah.
Because it kind of is what it is. I was both surprised and not surprised with rewatching this. And what surprised me was the balls on the production company to make this TV movie. First of all, because they don't have the Ewoks speaking English at all, which is surprising.
You're left up to the narrator. It's all narrated. Yes. Their inner thoughts. The intentions, what's happening. Yeah. Yes. It's like a voice of God, and it's never explained who it is.
Yeah, it's never explained who it is. But it's Burl Ives, who did like Frosty the Snowman and I forget what other Christmas movies. But the really shocking, it felt like a nature documentary at first because you start on, they set up the parents crashing and getting separated by the kids, and then it cuts to the Ewok village, and it's literally like, here's the Ewok village. Yes. They're having a hard day today as the sun is out and they have to do work. Wicket doesn't want to do work. Look at him go.
It was like the Star Wars equivalent of like a David Attenborough, like planet Earth. Yes, it was very much like.
It was like Third Moon Indoor.
Yeah.
And so that part was like, oh my God, they're really trying to do something kind of different. And quite frankly, as a 10-year-old watching this, I was like, this is boring.
Yeah. It was very slow paced.
Yes. As a current aged person, 40 years later, I'm not going to say the number. You need to do the math. I would say that it was really interesting to see it being told from that point of view. I think it was still a little boring. I did watch it at 1.5 speed just to kind of get through it. It was fascinating to see this very kind of like nature documentary take on the Ewoks. I was also surprised when, I'm sorry, I'm like blah, blah, blah.
No. This is the point of our minisode. Continue.
The Wisties.
Yes.
I didn't realize they were such like a major part of it in the 2014 game Battlefront. No.
Maybe, so I didn't include that in my review. Maybe explain the Wisties and their place in the story. Yes, for those who haven't seen. I apologize for leaving them out. Yeah.
The Wisties are basically Tinkerbells. They're like small lightning fairies that just like flit around, and they come out at night and they're very energetic and it excites the Ewoks. I mean, they all go out when the Wisties are out and they're like, Wisties.
It makes them so happy.
Wisties. Yes. Yeah, it makes them so happy. I don't know anything more than that because my brain kind of shut off when they were like starting to explain.
But they're a character in the greater story. Yes, I don't know if they serve any real purpose outside of just kind of coloring the Ewok life and culture. And
it felt like that's what it was. Yeah, because they do show up in the cartoon, and then in Battlefront 2. The game from 2017.
Very excited to play that. We just got a PS5. Anyway, continue.
The Wisties are part of the armament or weapons of the Ewoks. They will somehow shoot like Wisties at you, and they surround you and confuse you and
that's so
cause
cool.
damage.
You can just throw a fairy at your enemy.
Well, it's like a whole bunch of them.
Take this, bitch.
Yeah, exactly. And they fly around. And so I was really like, I thought that was something that DICE invented for the game. And it really goes all the way back to 1985.
Wow. That's awesome. I did not know that. I didn't make that connection because I haven't played the game yet. So that's super rad. Yeah.
Yes. So a lot of little things like that. The other thing I was surprised by, first of all, was learning about the Ewok Society, which I kind of found interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Also, how much magic was in there.
Yeah.
That, like, Logray is the head chief, right? I forget the magicians.
I believe so. Yeah. Hang on. Let me.
Wasn't it?
Yes, he's Logray. I think he's like. Yes, I think he's like the wise and strong or something. Isn't that like his?
Yes.
Yeah. Or was that Chalk? Anyway,
I think he was the warrior.
The warrior, and then Logray was the wise and strong. Okay. We apologize for not having figured that out.
Yes, right.
The recording. Yeah.
A lot of this will be just cut out.
No.
So anyway, they had kind of mystical things that make more sense in the Star Wars universe now that there are like the Witches of Dathomir, the Mortis storyline, things that are much more what I would call mythical and magical than the Force.
Yeah.
And it was also, they had to take this one kind of test from this wizard Ewok, and it was like, Mace had to grab something out of the Ewok's wand, and it turned into a lizard, and it showed that he failed the test. And then Sindel picked it up, and it turned into a mouse, and the Ewok was like, oh, well, you are pure and good. I will follow you.
And she was, oh my God, she was so cute. Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect casting.
Right?
Anyway. No, but you're right. There was this like, for me, it really showed like just like it really enhanced like the culture and specifically like the spiritual beliefs of Ewoks.
Yeah,
that's kind of what we're circling on right now. But like how it's entwined with their natural environment so much, it was very pagan in its thinking, which is great. But there's a word for it where like you have a belief system that centers on like the idea that like spirits can reside in like natural objects or like phenomena. I can't remember what the word for it is right now, but like they definitely believed like the forest was inhabited by benevolent spirits and like the objects could kind of like much almost like a rune reading kind of like that the object was giving them kind of clarity around how to proceed in their journey, you know, who was like worthy of proceeding in this caravan of courage was a little bit a piece of that. Yeah, that there was so many like guardians of the forests and the resources, and so there was like a deep connection to nature. Yeah. Something that comes up in the cartoon is the Great Tree, which maybe I should pause here and read the summary of episode 1 of The Cries of the Trees. This is Star Wars Ewoks season 1. We see a return of the characters from the film. So we see like Wicket and Knessa, I think it's Knessa, Teak and Logray, but his son, Chirpa. And they get caught lying about a monster. So their punishment's to clean the village. Right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Yes. However, strange events
because it's a 1985 cartoon, so of course the punishment is cleaning because every kid in 1980 hated cleaning.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So they have to clean the whole village. There was a significant error in judgment, and they needed to be punished for that. But strange events occur, like glowing leaves. There's something around like the disappearing of a water point. To be completely frank, I had a hard time sticking with the cartoon, and we will get to that in a minute. But you know what I'm going to say. But so Wicket and his friends, they're kind of like ostracized for lying. There's kind of like this boy cries wolf situation going on. But so they have to uncover the truth, and they have to expose this villain, Morag, who's a witch.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they also practice magic, so I don't like the disparaging language around witches, so I'm just going to say it was a villain who plans to burn down the forest. And so they find help from a reclusive Ewok named Jindus, and he possesses water magic, and they are able to
You sound like a 6-year-old telling me your dream from last night.
I know! That's how it feels to counter Morag's fire. That's what happens in episode 1. Going back to what I was saying. So the tree serves great significance. There was a threat that he was going to burn down the forest and burn down the great tree. And it's kind of the central element to their spirituality and their culture. They believe that the great tree is a symbol of life. much like the tree of life might be seen as a symbol of life for those who kind of maybe follow more of a pagan lifestyle and ritualistic view of the world. I think I already said that there was a lot of kind of like shamanistic elements. There were spiritual leaders that they had to kind of bring in and offer gifts to seek their wisdom and their courage, their skill. We saw a lot of rituals and ceremonies. I have a list. If you can't tell, I'm reading from my list of notes. So they engaged in a lot of that. A lot of stuff around food and dance, which we also see in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And then just kind of like, I felt like my biggest takeaway was like, they live so much in like this kind of balance and harmony with nature, and they use very like homeopathic medicines and maybe tools that might be seen as more primitive, well, and are maybe more primitive compared to like, you know, the Galactic Empire's technology.
They're very like Flintstones primitive.
Yeah.
You know, like rocks and sticks tied together, but it's still an axe.
And it's effective.
Yes.
Which is some of the criticism around Ewoks that we'll get to later. But that was my biggest takeaway. I hinted at this. I had a hard time keeping up with the cartoon. I was afraid of cartoons as a child.
So
we've touched on this before.
I know, but what is it about cartoons that
freaked me out?
Yes.
We don't really know. It started before I even have memory. My parents said there was a TV show I liked as like a really young kid. They don't even remember what it was. But The Simpsons would come on after it at like 8 p.m. or something like that, or like 7 o'clock. I don't know what time Simpsons aired. But The Simpsons would come on, and apparently I would just burst into tears and start running around screaming, "No Simspa, no Simspa." Of course, I have no recollection of any of this. But so it started out conscious memory. And,
yes.
Yeah. But it existed. And so I don't know. I've done a lot of it's probably something I should consult a therapist about, quite frankly, if I was triggered again by watching Star Wars Ewoks. But I think it was.
How are you going to get through the Clone Wars?
No. But see, it's a very specific type of animation I've noticed as I've gotten older. It's this I think it's almost like the uncanny valley effect is what they call it. Like when kids are having a hard time, when cartoon features are really exaggerated or in an unrealistic form, and it's not necessarily like a creature that's something that's new. Like The Simpsons, those are human characters that don't look human.
Yes.
You know, their color.
They look alien.
They look
you're
alien.
Concerned that you were
and there's a lot of
abducted by aliens as a child.
Maybe I was. Maybe you heard it here first, folks. That's why I'm so weird. So I think that's what it was. But it's interesting because with something like the Ewoks, they aren't really any real creature, but they resemble bears. And I think that their exaggeration in their illustration had that reptilian part of my brain going, oh, this feels uncomfortable. But I did feel a little bit uneasy at first and was trying to figure out why, and then recalled, it's probably because, we hold on to our traumas from childhood.
Yes.
And for some reason, that was one of mine.
I'm glad you were able to use Star Wars to work through that particular trauma.
Yeah.
Because I think it's rewarding. Now that we've watched Caravan of Courage and an episode of Ewoks, which, by the way, that episode of Ewoks was written by Paul Dini, who's one of the co-creators of Batman the Animated Series.
Very cool.
And I feel like we don't talk about that enough, that Paul Dini wrote the pilot episode of Ewoks.
That is really cool.
What it was,
it was a great story. I didn't dislike it.
Yeah.
I just may not be something I turn on in the background. Yeah.
Look. Here's the thing: is most cartoons from the early to late 80s were garbage. Just hot. Here are toys for you to buy. Garbage.
Sure.
What? That was harsh, man.
Well, we don't have to use that. Okay, so wait, so you said that we don't talk about it enough, that he wrote that episode. Maybe we should talk about some other facts. You pulled up some really interesting facts on Ewoks. Yeah.
Yes, okay, so some other interesting.
Please pivot away from my childhood, fears, phobias.
Just some Ewok facts. The name Ewok is never said in the movie Return of the Jedi.
Wild to me.
Right? Which isn't, but it's not too much of a surprise when you think about it, because AT-AT never used.
Yeah, but they named the Wookiees. And
they named the Wookiees. Yeah. But Forlom Like Bach,
Yeah,
like
that's
all
fair.
the bounty hunter names, Dengar, I don't think any of them had mention.
That's true. You had to go looking. Yeah.
Let's see. Originally, Wookiees, I mean, this is, everyone knows this, but Wookiees were going to help the rebels in the fight against the Empire. But Lucas felt as though we've seen 2 films where Chewie was kind of like a very good pilot and very good mechanic, so it would be weird to then see the Wookiees as a primitive society. So he changed it to Ewoks.
Yeah.
Which the word Ewok is Wookiee phonetically backward.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. Yeah.
And Ben Burt based Ewokese, the language, on a real language. He was inspired by the Kalmyk language of the Mongolian region of Russia.
Very cool.
And then Stuart Freeman, who was the makeup supervisor on the original trilogy, designed the Ewoks masks.
Yeah.
And one thing I think Warwick Davis brings so much life to, first of all, physically, he brings so much life to the character of Wicket.
Yeah.
I mean, he really does. But he does this thing with his tongue where he sticks it out between the fake teeth of the Ewok, which gives his mouth so much more life than it allows for in just the costume. Because you watch the other Ewoks, and they have like different bigger teeth, and it really quite disturbing teeth. And they're talking, and it's not as effective as what Warwick does with his tongue. I wish I didn't say it like that. What Warwick Davis does with his mouth. There's no way of saying this good.
No, there isn't.
But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, you're right. There's a great interview that is coming up next week that you'll be hearing this episode with Charles Stewart, where we talked a lot about kind of like mask work and like the people behind the masks and how that's so important to bringing like a character to screen. And I think this is a classic example of like why that's true.
Yes.
That the actors behind the masks in Caravan of Courage brought so much to what was otherwise a pretty flat script.
Yes.
And it shows. And I think it's actually what made it a cult classic, if you can kind of call it that. I do think it has a place in kind of, especially I think the original trilogy kids, like love and fandom of Star Wars. I think so much of that is actually due to the character choices like that they made.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also think that this worked better. Like I said, I was 10 or 11 at the time. No, I was 12 or 13 at the time. A little old for the Ewok television movie.
Yeah.
But I do think younger, like 5, 6, probably loved this.
Yeah, totally.
Having talked about this, do you see why Cavan Scott is a fan of Ewoks?
Totally. Well, okay, so I did a little bit of like research on kind of like public response to Ewoks.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I think that it kind of paints a good picture as to like why they are beloved, because there actually is so much more admiration for them out there than there is criticism.
Oh, wow.
They were definitely, like, in terms of the negative, a lot of people criticized it as being seen as like a marketing ploy and a merchandising opportunity. That I don't pay any mind to, because that's all of Star Wars, or any
right.
But really, like any epic story that someone's trying to, like, Marvel does it, everyone does it.
Yes.
You know, they were seen as being too childish. I also think this is an unfair criticism because a lot of Star Wars is targeted towards kids. So why wouldn't there be characters that are designed to appeal to kids? Like that doesn't seem like a criticism to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's so true.
Yeah, there was also a lot of criticism around their like unrealistic defeat of the Empire. That, you know, how is it that these like technologically primitive species, these aliens, are, you know, taking down Imperial forces? I think that after watching Caravan of Courage and tapping into the cartoon and our conversation with Cavan Scott, I think that's actually kind of an unfair approach to take. I think that all of Star Wars is about the underdog, right? Like taking on the Empire. And there's no reason why they can't have taken out enemy forces using a technology that maybe is seen as more primitive. It's still a weapon. Like, it's still a tool. I think it really takes away from the resourcefulness and the skill and the tact that Ewoks kind of, have as not only a society, but as kind of like in their warrior mentality as soldiers. I don't think that's the right word for them, but like, you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
No, I totally get what you're saying. And the other thing is they are characters based upon a metaphor or analogy, which is what you were saying about the oppressed taking on the oppressors, the underdogs fighting the alpha dog.
Yeah.
George Lucas even said they represent the Viet Cong taking on an empire like the Americas back in during the Vietnamese War.
Yeah.
So in their
How about
cuteness,
for you? Yeah, I think we're getting to that. Like, yeah.
Yeah. For me, I don't know. It's hard to say because I never really got into the argument that they were just cuddly teddy bears made for commercialism. But I also was never like, oh my God, it's like the Ewok figures. I may only have had one or two. I did not have a ton of Ewok figures.
Yeah.
But watching this made me appreciate them more. Of course, playing Battlefront 2 makes me appreciate them more because they are these like fierce warriors that just happen to be cute little teddy bears. Boop, right on the nose.
1,000%.
Yeah, so I enjoyed going back and learning more about them and seeing more of how their history or their origins from the 80s really affected things up until now.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think that just because something is different or someone is different doesn't mean that they don't also have power and skill. And I think that this like seemingly not advanced technology is, one of the criticisms was that like there was kind of like this potential racial stereotyping around like the characters of the Ewoks.
Yeah.
It was kind of more associated with like more indigenous and tribal peoples and culture. I find it more offensive in the argument that like, oh, well, they weren't strong enough to defeat the Empire. If that is where that kind of character, the language and the culture and stuff was derived from and inspired from, I think it's actually more offensive to say, oh, well, there's no way they could have won. There's no way they were like courageous and strong enough. They're just teddy bears. So I don't know. I feel like they're a really amazing symbol of like unity and cooperation, and they have that underdog appeal. They're like innocent and endearing, but like their connection to nature and their spirituality and their technology, though it may not be lasers.
Yeah, exactly.
Shows a really highly evolved. Exactly. It shows a really highly evolved species, and yeah, they also provide a little bit of comic relief because they're super cute. But I really think that, though. I think that there was that much thought put into their character. I don't think that they were just a simple marketing ploy that you could write off as a cultural appropriation. Like, they are very well thought out, and everything about them was made intentionally and or designed intentionally. You are going to always have like a culture that's a little bit more technologically advanced than another as like you move through time. Throughout our history, that is a thing. And it would make sense that that's also representative in the galaxy far, far away.
Absolutely. That's
a very like, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of issues of a cultural appropriation in places in Star Wars. I don't think this is one of them. Like,
that's all I'm saying. Agree. I agree with that.
Trade Federation? Let's have a whole episode on that.
There's some issues there.
There's some major issues there. But at the end of the day, I completely understand why Cavan Scott's such a huge fan. I think that I really appreciate that we took the time to dive into all of this content, because I now have a bigger respect for them as a character, and I think that they're often not appreciated enough for what they represent and what they are in the Star Wars universe. So that's my soapbox moment for the day. I don't know if I would run to watch Caravan of Courage again, but...
Okay.
Would you?
I don't think I'd run to watch Caravan of Courage again. Yeah. I don't fully regret that I watched it.
Same.
But will you watch Battle for Endor?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think I have to at this point. I think, yeah.
I 100% agree. I feel like I need to watch that now.
Yes. Gotta complete the Ewok journey.
And now it's time for Matthew Freeman's Octu Baby. Matthew is a friend of the show and the author of the extremely enjoyable newsletter, Octobaby. You can find the link in the podcast notes or go to matthewfreeman.substack.com.
Hello, this is Matt Freeman, and this is Return of the Jedi, which was originally published on my newsletter Octobaby on January 11th, 2024. Essex Green. The first time I saw Return of the Jedi, it was at a movie theater called Essex Green. I remember standing on the lawn of our modest house in suburban Maplewood, New Jersey, when my father announced we were all going to the movies. I remember sitting close to the screen, looking up at the giants, taking in the vivid greenery of Endor. I remember the moment Luke Skywalker declared himself a Jedi, which sparked a lifelong love of Star Wars. I would love to paint you a picture of the rest of the day, how I talked about the movie afterwards. Who else was there? My whole family, probably, but is that right? If we went out to eat afterwards or before, but it's simply not available to me. I was 7 years old. I'm writing this over 40 years later. There are things I've forgotten. I have a history, because here I am. Where would I be without it? But it's fractured, not whole. I've been thinking a lot about memory lately. I don't know if it's aging or the way time was distorted during the pandemic, but I find myself forgetting things, needing to be reminded of them more than I have in the past. It's made me feel especially mortal and especially aware of what remains and what doesn't, noticing what my mind chooses to keep and what it lets go. Return of the Jedi existed before most of my memories were made. I saw Return of the Jedi before my parents split up. My father moved out and then moved further and further away. I saw it before my mother moved us from suburban New Jersey to rural Pennsylvania so she could teach high school English before she got remarried, before I had step-siblings, half-brothers, before my brother Michael died. I saw it before I knew about theater, before I'd seen a play, before I'd been kissed, except by Katie Gamble in kindergarten while we were playing checkers. It was there before I'd fallen in love, and then fallen in love again, and then again. Before I got lost, before I got married. I saw it before I ever played Nintendo. It was there before I'd learned to like coffee, to drink beer, before I'd been outside the United States, before I'd lost a grandparent, before my uncle died, before I'd met one of my grandfathers, who I didn't meet until I was 21. Return of the Jedi was a part of my life before I could legally work. It was there before I sold Uncle Alligator meals at Rack's Roast Beef, or got fired from 1 hour Motophoto for being late, or was seasonally employed at a Barnes & Noble in Boston. I saw it before I worked that one summer at a landfill. I was fired there too, or as an assistant for a life settlement company, or as a part-time HR assistant at Getty Images, also fired, where I met Pam, or was hired by the ACLU, where I've worked for more than a decade. In 1983, when I first met Ewoks and Jabba the Hutt, I had never written a play. The first one technically I wrote in the 5th grade as a part of an opera for our teacher, Mr. Scheitelman. I had never been to college, never auditioned, never had my work rejected, never had that one phone call where you aren't rejected and it feels like the world is saying keep going. Never had that rejection where it feels like the world is saying stop. Between Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace, I grew up. When I saw Return of the Jedi, I was barely in grade school, attending Marshall School, where Lauryn Hill went at the same time. I know, I'm cool. And it wouldn't be until I was 23 that I saw a 4th Star Wars movie. From grade school to just out of college, that's how much life came between them. As I look back on that day, I remember what Luke said. I remember my dad. I remember the feeling, the fear of the Emperor, the delight in the space battle. But that's all I remember. I don't remember really living my 7th year at all. I couldn't tell you what I did on January 3rd of 1983 or March 10th or April 7th. Those days are a part of me. They were lived, but also they aren't. They're gone. Maybe that's why we love art, why we love movies, books, and paintings. They last. They're cave paintings. But as we change, they remain the same, just as they were when we first encountered them. Return of the Jedi is still the movie I watched when I was 7, mostly. Even if I can't remember the day itself anymore, even if I can't remember most of my days, I'll remember the first time I heard, I am a Jedi like my father before me. I have it memorized. Unlike most of the pieces of my life, I know Episode 6 by heart. What a phrase. By heart. Seeing Return of the Jedi for the first time was a moment that stayed, that I got to keep. I appreciate that more than ever, as so many moments, through no fault of their own, have moved into a locked compartment somewhere in the train of my mind. As so many days I've lived were a long time ago and far, far away. I'm grateful for those keepsakes, those stories that were a part of me before I lived my life, which I hope so far has been well lived. And I'm grateful now, as so much eludes me, for those proper nouns that serve as markers and maps for my memories, those places that give shape to my real story, even in memorializing a fictional one, like Essex Green.
So that's what Ewoks mean to us.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think? Are Ewoks cute, vicious, or just annoying? Has your opinion of them changed over the years? Get in on the conversation and join us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's at Star Wars Mean, the number 2 and the letter U. And next week, we talked to Charles Stewart.
I did. I kind of hinted that earlier.
Yeah, you hinted at that earlier.
I'm very excited about this one. We were both theater kids, and I hope you enjoy it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does a show called One Man Star Wars, where he goes through the entire trilogy, the original trilogy, on stage, live, playing every character.
It's incredible.
Really.
I've not seen it, but the clips I've seen are incredible.
Yes. And Charles Stewart is fantastic to talk to, very open and charming.
I could have talked to him like all day. Yeah.
I know. I actually had to stop the conversation. I was
If
like,
I recall, yeah, I remember.
It's been 5 hours, please.
I actually do. If I recall, you had to be like, I think we might be taking up more of your time than we asked for. Yeah, we should probably wrap this up. Yeah.
Well, that always happens talking Star Wars. Until next week, may the Force be with you.
And with you. Wow, we talked for almost 50 minutes about Ewoks, and we didn't even touch on Return of the Jedi and their obsession with C-3PO and their love of Leia.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, there's so much there still. So, maybe down the road, if this is a hit, we can talk more about it.
We'll do Ewoks Part 2.
Yeah.
Even more Ewok. Ewokier. Hi, this is Dave. And before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners. And that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 and the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars.